Lesson 6: Mendelian Inheritance of Human Traits. Welcome to our exploration of Mendelian inheritance of human traits, a captivating journey into the fundamental principles governing heredity. Inspired by Gregor Mendel's groundbreaking work with pea plants in the 19th century, this lesson illuminates how traits are transmitted from one generation to the next in humans. Through Mendel's discoveries of dominant and recessive alleles, will unravel the intricacies of genetic inheritance, from understanding genotype and phenotype to deciphering the patterns that dictate trait expression. Join us as we embark on a voyage through the genetic landscape of humanity, unlocking the secrets that shape our physical and biological identities. I am Mark Chandler C. Tosco, here to report on the topic Making a Pedigree. Geneticists are scientists who study how inherited genetic traits pass from one generation to the next. Sometimes they use what is called a pedigree to study a family's genetic puzzle. So, what is a pedigree? A pedigree is a visual diagram of genetic inheritance used by geneticists to map genetic traits. A pedigree uses a set of symbols to identify males and females in a certain family that carry the genetic trait being studied. A pedigree shows the relationship between family members and indicates which individuals have certain genetic pathogenic variants, traits, and diseases within a family. Creating a pedigree chart is a diagram that shows the occurrence and appearance of phenotypes of a particular gene or organism and its ancestors from one generation to the next. So why exactly is a pedigree important? By studying the pedigree, the geneticist will be able to see if it is likely that the trait will be passed on to children or grandchildren. An individual can also study the pedigree to see if there is a risk that he or she will pass along a genetic disease. Studying a family degree gives a lot of genetic information about a family.
Good day. Today, I will be reporting about the analyzation of pedigree. In analyzing a pedigree involves examining the family tree, identifying generations, differentiating genders with symbols, shading affected individuals, understanding symbol meanings, tracing lines to connect family members, determining the inheritance patterns, dominant or recessive, assessing consistency across generations, and considering genetic counseling if the pedigree suggests a risk for genetic disorder. Attention to detail and understanding genetic patterns are crucial for drawing accurate conclusions about the transmission of genetic traits. In general biology, the analysis of pedigrees involves studying the inheritance patterns of traits within families to understand genetic relationships and potential risks for certain conditions. Here is a general overview. Identifying overview. First step is identifying generations. Examine the pedigree chart to recognize different generations. Older generations are usually positioned at the top and younger generations are below. Differentiating genders. Use standardized symbol, typical squares for males and circle for female. Connect couples with horizontal lines and trait representation. Indicate the presence or absence of a specific trait by shading or leaving symbols. Unshaded traits can be dominant, recessive, X-linked, or autosomal. Understand symbolism. Know the meaning of symbols. Filled in shapes usually represent individuals expressing the trait, while unfulfilled shapes indicate individuals without the trait. Determine the inheritance patterns. Identify whether the trait follows a dominant recessive, X-linked, or autosomal pattern. For example, a dominant trait often appears in every generation, while a recessive trait may skip generations. Pedigree analysis is crucial for studying genetic disease, inheritance patterns, and the risk of a certain condition within families. It provides valuable insights into transmission of genetic traits and aids in making informed decisions regarding healthcare and family planning. And that will be all. Thank you.
Now, let us move on the simple recessive heredity and simple dominant heredity. Genetics plays a fundamental role in determining the inheritance of traits from parents to offspring. Two common patterns of inheritance are simple recessive heredity and simple dominant heredity. In simple recessive heredity, a trait is expressed only when an individual inherits two copies of recessive allele for that trait. The recessive allele is denoted by a lowercase letter. For a recessive trait to be expressed, both alleles must be recessive. Here in our module, there are different genetic disorders that are caused by the recessive alleles. These are the cystic fibrosis, Tay-Sachs disease, and the phenylketonuria, also known as PKU. I will give you a simple description about these three. First is the cystic fibrosis. Cystic fibrosis is a genetic disorder that primarily affects the lungs and digestive system. Second is the Tay-Sachs disease. Tay-Sachs disease is a rare genetic disorder that primarily affects the nervous system. And third is the phenylketonuria, also known as PKU. Phenylketonuria, or PKU, is a genetic disorder that affects the body's ability to break down the amino acid phenylalanine. These disorders are inherited in an autosomal recessive manner, meaning that a child must inherit a mutated gene from both parents to develop the condition. Now, let us move on simple dominant heredity. In simple dominant heredity, a trait is expressed if the individual carries at least one copy of the dominant allele for that trait. If the recessive allele is denoted by a lowercase letter, the dominant allele is denoted by an uppercase letter. Here in our module, the Huntington's disease is caused by a rare dominant allele. Huntington's disease is a progressive genetic disorder that affects the brain and leads to the degeneration of nerve cells. It is characterized by a combination of motor, cognitive, and psychiatric symptoms. There is no effective treatment for Huntington's disease. Research into potential treatments and therapies for Huntington's disease is still ongoing, with the hope of one day finding a cure or more effective treatment for this devastating condition. These genetic disorders that are mentioned can be predicted and better understand the risk of the disease using the pedigree. That's all. Thank you.